Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. Clean that crud out of your ears, because it's time for another episode of Rock and Read. Today we'll read Chapter 9 of It's So Easy and Otherwise by Duff McKagan. Chapter 9 is called IZZY. Fun fact, the thumbnail for this video was pulled directly from Duff's photo gallery. Here's the photo. Izzy is on the left and Duff is on the right. Jamming together an early G&R gig. Let's see what Chapter 9 has in store. Not too long after I got laid off from the Black Angus, I found a steady job again at an office in a back alley near where Hollywood Boulevard crossed the freeway. The company ostensibly sold office supplies, but the specifics of my work made me wonder. A day's work typically consisted of a pistol-packing guy in a tracksuit with difficult-to-pinpoint Eastern European accent telling me to drive an unmarked truck or panel van between two random anonymous addresses in the city. Scratch that. To call the hidden alleyways, abandoned lots, and remote underpasses where I found and left trucks addresses would be a stretch. I never asked what was being transported. It didn't seem like a safe question, I guess. With all that driving around town, I began to see how segregated LA was. A lot of my colleagues would refuse to make deliveries to Watts. That blew me away. In Seattle, there just weren't places people refused to go. Seattle had a black area, the Central District, but things weren't delineated nearly as starkly as they were in LA. I went to school in the Central District. In LA, people who lived in Hollywood didn't leave Hollywood. People in the Jewish enclave or Fairfax didn't leave Fairfax. People in Watts didn't leave Watts and didn't even seem to know where Hollywood was. Fear swathed the city. One day in February 1985, as I was coming home from work, I ran into IZZY. He told me he was starting a new band with a couple guys from LA Guns, the band Slash had taken me to see back in October. Axl Rose, the vocalist from the version of LA Guns I had seen, had grown up with IZZY in Indiana, my home state. Woohoo! And followed him out to LA. Axl had just moved into a place on our low-rent, high-crime block of Orchard Street, this buzzing hive of prostitution and drug dealing. IZZY's new band also featured Tracy Guns on lead guitar. They were calling the new group Guns N' Roses. Almost immediately, the new group parted ways with their first bass player. IZZY came to me at that point. "Don't you play bass?" he asked me. "I own a bass," I said. I was getting comfortable playing 4 strings by then, but I had not come close to developing my own style yet. Fortunately, one of the advantages of being young, I had just turned 21, was fearlessness and unbridled confidence. Not to mention the fact that I no longer had a guitar. At this point, it was bass or nothing. When I showed up at my first G&R rehearsal in late March 1985, Axl and I said hi to each other and started joking around about this and that. I liked him right away. Whoever was running the sound then asked Axl to test out the microphone. Axl let out one of his screams, and it was like nothing I had ever heard. There were 2 voices coming out at once. There's a name for that in musicology, but all I knew in that instant was that this dude was different and powerful and serious. He hadn't yet entirely harnessed his voice. He was more unique than great at that point, but it was clear he hadn't moved out to Hollywood from Indiana for the weather. He was here to stake a claim and show the whole world what he had. As for IZZY, he wasn't a great guitar player, but I liked that, both in him and in general. I wasn't a great guitar player either. It was a punk thing. One night, when we were talking after rehearsal, IZZY mentioned a band called Naughty Women. It rang a bell. "I know that band," I said, trying to place the name. "I think I played a gig on the same bill with them once." Wait. Were they cross-dressers?" "Yep," IZZY said. He paused. "I was the drummer," he said. Cool, I thought. This guy really was a veteran of the punk rock club scene. He was the real deal. IZZY and Axl already had some songs, and the other guys knew them. Think About You, Anything Goes, Move to the City, Shadow of Your Love, and Don't Cry. And we did sped-up punk versions of the Stones' Jumpin' Jack Flash and Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel. Rob Gardner, the drummer, played a double-kick drum set, a metal dude. Tracy was an incredible guitar player, but his sound was also really metal. My initial impression was that he didn't have the feel I had reorganized in Slash. Once again, I realized with a sinking feeling that this was not the band I was seeking, not one that could move the needle musically. They had some gigs booked though, and since Izzy and I had a lot in common and Axel seemed so unique, I decided I would stick it out for a while. After we had played the Dancing Waters Club and another gig so forgettable I can't remember the name of the venue, any excitement I had about the band dwindled. I missed the next rehearsal. Axel called me after that. He could tell I was pulling back and asked me to please come to the next rehearsal. I reluctantly agreed. Axel met me outside the rehearsal space to talk about my reservations. "You have to be a part of this," he said. "Give it another chance." One thing I soon learned about Axel: if he saw something in a person, he would do everything possible to ensure that person remained part of his vision. Part of my problem with the band was that I was skeptical about the commitment of Tracy and Rob, who both had comfortable suburban lives in LA. I had already recognized the difference between people from LA and from people who moved there. Axel and Izzy were distinct, even from other transplants. They were serious in a whole different way. Axel sometimes slept on the street back then. It was also clear that Izzy would do whatever it took, heroin habit or not. "You can come with us or not." They would seem to say, "But we're going to make our way and realize our dream." I like that. Still, I wasn't sure how best to express this to Axel. I told him I just didn't think that Rob and Tracy were cut out for going all in and sacrificing everything to work on their craft. Axel didn't argue. We went inside. During rehearsal, I had an idea. I had been going through the punk rock crucible. I was used to sleeping on floors and doing anything else necessary to get my band out there. In my experience, conditions like that also offered a chance to see what your bandmates were really made of. A shakeout cruise could be just what Guns N' Roses needed. I pulled aside Axel and Izzy. "Listen, how would you guys like to play some places besides Dancing Waters and San Pedro?" They nodded. "If we're going to play for 3 people," I said, "let's at least go do it other places." Said Izzy. I could tell immediately that Izzy understood what I was up to. He had been through this before. He knew this was a way to test the links in a band and find the weak ones. In the first wave punk bands I played in, we booked our own gigs, functioned as our own tour managers, handled our own dough, made our own concert t-shirts. The do-it-yourself ethic had been strong, and as a result I knew the nuts and bolts of the business. With some songs mastered in these local gigs under our belts, I knew I could use the contacts I had accumulated over the years to line up some shows for the fledgling Guns N' Roses, a punk rock tour of the West Coast. "I think I can book us a tour," I said. "It'll be bare bones, but we'll be out there playing." They loved the idea. "Yeah, let's do it!" I was excited now too. We would know by the end of this whether GNR was the real deal or not. Punk rock tours in those days ran on pure adventure and adrenaline. You counted yourself lucky if you earned enough to pay for gas and still had something left over to buy ramen noodles. You slept at a crash house if you could find one, or on the club floor if the owner liked you. But none of that was important. The main thing was that it offered the chance to prove yourself, to push yourself beyond the confines of your comfort zone, to take music you believed into other people's town, to throw all caution to the wind. Come to think of it, there was no caution in those days. I was able to book us a string of dates, mostly in places I had played with previous bands or been through while working briefly as a roadie for the Fastbacks. The first show would be a homecoming gig for me, a June 12th slot supporting the Fastbacks at the then new Seattle club called Gorilla Gardens. The crowd there probably goes bananas. The rest of the dates were in little punk venues, communal houses, and squats down the coast back toward LA. We would play 13th Precinct in Portland, the basement of a communal punk house in Eugene, another house in Sacramento, and a club called Mabuhay Gardens in San Francisco. That was the full extent of the plan. We would figure out everything else, including where we would sleep and how we would eat on the fly. Rob and Tracy were skeptical about the idea from the start. I guess they weren't sure whether to take the leap of faith necessary to leave home with nothing but your bandmates and wits to depend on. And just a few weeks before we were to leave, they broke the news. They weren't up for a no-budget road trip. Not knowing where we would sleep each night was too much for them. I assured them that we'd find places to crash, and anyway, what did it matter? we would be on tour, a concept that to me was pure magic. It didn't matter. First Rob and then Tracy backed out. We had 10 days before we were scheduled to leave for the tour. Don't worry, I told Izzy and Axel, who were fully committed and for whom hitting the road had the same mythic appeal it had for me. I know a couple guys we can bring in. That's the end of Chapter 9. Let me know what you guys thought of Chapter 9 in the comments below. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Till then, rock on.